we start. Come on. Okay. Guys, you're going to have to get a bit more forward. Right? So just because the girls are needing it. So the logic for stretching the glute is what? You know what, you're worse than bloody hockey. 7:30, you fight smoking with the dentist. Is there anybody there? What's the most powerful muscle? Good. Where's it relevant in the boat? Everywhere. Right. Actual answer. But at least you're doing something. Good. So you've picked, each of you have picked, those of you who weren't here last week, you've each picked a go-to stretch for you. The problem with just the one go-to stretch is it only stretches some of, or only hits some of the fibres in that big muscle. So you have to do more than one, and you have to explore the range. So one of the things that we did last week in the comments I had last week was, let's start to play with even the stretch of your back. So if you move your foot, if you're in a kneeling stretch, if you move your foot closer towards your hands, okay, and look up, you will find it hits you in a different way. Okay, so different. So the one stretch can be manipulated in its own right. So when you just flop down and do it, you're wasting an opportunity. Okay, I see we've done both legs. We've just focused on one leg, so we'll go the other. How uncomfortable is this? Not comfortable. Okay. Good. So should stretching be painful? No. Okay. Should it be uncomfortable? Yes. And it's a fine line. Should it create a hot burning sensation? Right at the edge. Any form of stretching is actually creating a hot burning sensation. Now, if it's hot and burning, we've probably gone a little bit too far. Okay? What about time scales? About 30 seconds? Yeah, lots of kind of debate around that points on the sides, but 20 to 30 seconds seems good. Sitting around for a minute doesn't seem to make any difference. Okay, so. Very good. So differential between warming up and warming down. My language might be preparation in terms of the warm-up. Does it make a difference for those that weren't here last week? So this kind of stretching, which is long, slow, static stretching, is not a good plan before we go to both or get on the air. It is a good plan at the end of it, or it is a good plan if you want to try and get yourself more mobile in the week. Alright, so there's definitely a difference between the two. Okay, we've done one. What stretch didn't you do personally to do the other one? So we predominantly have people in this position, I think. Now we're going to look at this position. So pull this foot up, grab this. Initially you can grab it quite tightly, and you should feel it in glute again. And then we'll add something to it later. Right? So one or two have already adopted the other. Can you feel the difference when you squeeze? And feel the difference when you pull this leg up towards you and squeeze at the same time. The other thing we'll see is some of you slumping. Okay, so you have two bones in the bum that were designed to sit on. And certainly if you think about where we're going to be in the boat, we need to be up with a flat back ideally. So what's the deal? Do we get this in as close as we can and compromise the back position? No. So what we do is we let this go to the point and then we're going to come right up as much as we can, and then we're going to pull in and maintain our back position. Okay, so you should be, ideally, sat right up on the bones. If you're not, then let the leg go away from you. For those who can, the next option is to, if you've got your right leg across, is to bring, I'll give you the model if that's all right. Yes, you. Is to do this. So we can begin to introduce some spinal rotation from this, where the left leg is across, the right leg's across the left leg, and now the left arm is across the right knee. And that's helping you get rotation. What must happen here is the spine must be straight, okay, before it rotates. So that comes back to sitting on and rotating through the length of the spine. When you do that push, you should feel that joint working even harder. But for you, that's probably jumped too far, because we're still doing punches around it. Get up. If it helps in this position, think about lifting your sternum. So don't stick it out, but just lift it. That gives you the lengthening of the spine around it. This should feel as though it's getting close to a very familiar, or what should become a very familiar position. Yeah? So change legs if you have. The thing about mobility work is it takes time. The other thing that people, I think last week, did you feel much better when you left? And actually, strangely not, I don't mean physically, but there's this kind of strange shift in your mental approach when you've done a good stretching session. Just makes you feel looser generally. It's an opportunity to relax at the same time. Who's fighting this stretch? How might you avoid fighting it? So who's thought about breathing? Okay, so what we're going to do, actually, I'll come on to breathing in a minute. We'll do that in a minute. But for the moment, who can belly breathe? Okay, that assumes that there are two forms of breathing there. Okay, so we'll come to that. What I'm interested in is you breathing in through your diaphragm into your belly. And then breathing out, and as you breathe out, change the tension, increase the tension on the stretch. Okay, so as you breathe out, you're going to get taller. You're going to make a little bit of an increase in tension on it, and hold that. Keep breathing, and then we'll do a big breath, and do the same, and progressively, things like heart rate change, so physiology changes, but also you can just get that sense of relaxation without needing to go. Okay, was there a third glute stretch? It's a big muscle. Anything else? Yep, so we've got a figure 4. The whole point about the figure 4 is what do you use? We're trying to use something for the leg that's coming across into, if you like, the forepiece here. We need to bring this towards us. What's the most effective thing to use to bring it towards us? Hands? No. Okay, because we're weak. So that the other leg that should be pulling up against your ankle, you can help it with your hands. Put your hand through it. Should be able to feel the difference when you've got your knee pulling in rather than your hands. You can help it. Right, there's a cheeky assistance here, so if you sit up a second, you can help this process. If you're in here, this is fine. So this leg's doing most of the work. I'm then going to put this hand through, lock this off, and with the elbow here, I can then push the other leg, and that gives me, together with this pull and that elbow working, you'll feel an additional load through the glute. Did you anybody see that? Yeah? Use that elbow and have a go. Different? The point I was trying to make to you last week is your job, individually, is to use this kind of approach to explore where in your body you need to hit. Lots of guys with their heads up, relax, make the spine long. Just relax. Yeah. So that's a classic case. If it doesn't get to you because you're immobile in some other places, which I'm not going to realise what you were, but stiff in some places, just don't go there. Use other things that are more effective. It's a good point. One of you just made the point that that stretch doesn't work for them because they can't get into the right shape or the right position. Maybe because they've had an injury or because they happen to be a bit tight to get into it. Well, don't do it then. There are some rules here about holding spinal shape that are important for us in terms of when we're doing this kind of mobility work. So don't compromise those key things just because we said that's one of the things, the tools that you can use. You know, it's rather like using, say, I could use a bandsaw to eat meat, but you may not necessarily use it. You're quite happy with the knife and fork. It would be inadequate in that sense. What was the next thing we did? What's the opposing muscle group? Hip flexors. Okay, this was a really challenging thing last week, wasn't it? Okay, the root for that was? Are you with us? Last week, we used a couple of things to get hip flexors. What were they? What stretches? Lunges? So we just started looking here. So trunk, really clearly shoulder over hip, upright, straight, tall, this lifted. 90 degrees at the front shin, hips pointing directly forward and just going through that range of movement was enough for most of you to start with. Right? So we'll see the back leg pull. Okay, then we're going to add some things into it later. So there's your opportunity. Let's see what happens to you. So the lunge length needs to be sufficient. This one is at 90 degrees. Okay, hips pointing straight forward. That's key. You see a lot of people with their hips out here. Hips pointing straight forward. And already some of you will be seeing, what are we going to do with the pelvis? So the pelvis, I might take you back actually, some people weren't here last week. Just head up with me. Sorry. So we talked about pelvis and bucket and balloon last week, I seem to remember. So we're going to look at the pelvis as a bucket of water. And we're going to be able to try and pour the water out of the front of the bucket. But I'm not moving my head. Okay, so this is taking place in and around my pelvis. So pour the water out front. Can you then pour the water out back? What I'm interested in is how do you achieve that? So what muscles do you use to pour the water out and back? Back side, which you shorten, and the front here, which you shorten. Okay. To do the opposite, we're going to shorten our lower back, and actually you can't feel it happening, but we're shortening hip flexors. In the main, it's coming from here, tipping forward. So between the two of those is our neutral position for us at this time. So between those two, where can I hold the water in the bucket so I'm not spilling it? Because that's a position that we need to now understand here. Because if I'm tight through my hip flexors, we know, as we just said it, I can drop into here. And we're trying to stretch our hip flexors. So they come up, into our neutral position. Once that's there, then make that descent, and you'll feel a completely different tension on the hip flexor. Alright, so explore, find your water in the bucket position, hips pointing straight forward. Back into it. And then straighten this leg, come up. Orientate that. Now. So now I want you to shorten this distance. Okay. Shorten that, now descend. Keep that short now. So drop this. Keep it level. Keep it short, now descend. So you can't, can you? Really tight now. Okay. So that's a classic case of you not being able to hit that, compromise everything else. And actually what's happening here is you're dropping this hip big time. So look at the difference in the hip levels. Okay, so keep those level, tuck this, and now go down. And that's a good spot now. Okay? Anybody else having issues? Okay. Well, what's the biggest? Can we see definitely here? We just had a really good example. John. Really interesting with John saying, I'm not feeling this at all. And we changed a couple of things, didn't we? Which were, one, to get pelvis level. Two, as we tried to straighten him up, he's so tight through here, it pulled the pelvis out of alignment and into forward. Little bit of work, back in, we've now got the right shape to be able to hit it. All right, and that's going to be really important when we come to the next thing. Who's having any difficulties with that? Do you understand the importance of this? Okay, we'll work it out. Can do a bit of work over there. Anyone else? Okay, right, so the progression, that is when we're here, we've got this in neutral. We're now going to take for the back leg, this arm is going to come straight up. And the objective is to reach as tall as you can. Okay, with this, reach, reach, reach. Once that's done, we're going to go back from the hip. So I don't mean this. Back from the hip, and then away. And you'll see very quickly that focuses that stretch even more on that hip flexor. The key that you will find often is that when this happens, this will try and pull through. You need to fix here when this happens to make this work. Alright? Okay, so 8 or 10 seconds on each leg, block of 3. Just get into that kind of starting launch position with the center. So start position where it is easier to keep it. Okay? Right, so back there, we'll take the heel back towards the leg. So that's now position. Alright? Touch this up. This is now short. Shortens. You feel like right, now just keep it short and descend. Short, short. So you go so far. So just go to the right hand. Shorten this. Don't worry what these people do. Shorten this. Short. Now descend slowly. Uncomfortable way? No. Feel it. Okay. Sometimes it's tight. So what tends to do is pull the outer shape. Just have to not try to get to the end before you do it. So how are we doing, guys? Lots of cheating going on. What's happening to your hand? See some of you bracing quite hard. Is that hitting the spot? How's that? Hard to balance. So, one comment, hard to balance. So, we'll probably see with some of you that you've got your feet pretty much in line. Okay, just step out to give yourself a little hit. Okay. So it should still be hit with. Start here, goes going forward, rather than trying to get it in line. Easier? So, reaching those is really only a couple of inches depending on how it feels here. So we're not trying to get right over. Okay. Just till we get some tension onto the hip flexors. So we've done 3 sets. Okay, can we take shoes off, please? And this is where you get to know your friends. We're not going to play with each other's feet. It's not some kind of fetish work. Right, what I'm interested in to try and understand is one of the key things coming through from all the screenings was ankle mobility. Okay? So ankle mobility bizarrely starts actually in the ankle. Whereas most people have this thing that it's largely to do with the Achilles and the calf. It's relevant, yes. But mobility starts in the foot, has the same similar number of bones to the hand, and it needs to be as mobile as the hand. It is in effect, remember we were quadrupeds. We started with all 4 hands and feet on the floor. Right? Can I borrow something? Just anybody who's got feet. Good. Okay. Just if you sit down, you guys might want to come around a bit for this. Because you can't really do this on your own. It's really simple. It's non-invasive, it's very straightforward. So what we're going to try and do is understand we've got a longitudinal arch that runs this way, but we also have a lateral arch that runs that way. And the foot needs to be really mobile to get information out off the floor. So it has receptors in the sole of the foot that give information back up into the rest of the body. But also how this moves, how the foot moves, we can assist. So I'm going to hold this, cup the heel, put the sole of the foot against my arm, and then I'm going to effectively distract, or I'm going to pull the heel up as I push down. This will feel quite weird, it will not come off in my hand.
I don't like that.
Okay, so you're okay because you've got really mobile. So all we're doing is just moving. What we're doing is we're moving the base joints in here over one each other.
It's like being pulled out. Sorry.
Yeah, it feels because you've got you're mobile classically for women. We'll see with some of the other guys, but you just need to get that working. It's not a great big pull. It does feel strange, but unsurprisingly, any more than I can pull your arm out of your shoulder, I can't do that. Okay, so that's we're going to distract it here, and then we're going to work here. So it will click with some of you, yeah. So particularly with women who are more mobile than others, yeah. So that will help mobilise that lower joint, and we can then work here. We forget that the foot needs to work like this. That's the lateral arch mobility working through here. And the other thing we can begin to do is to then take each ray, which is effectively the bone in here, and we can begin to mobilise. And that's quite interesting. So that's mobile. That's okay. Much less here now, and this is really stiff. Okay. So okay, so then we can always work this leg, so we can pull this way. Now stand up and compare the two. Feel any different?
Yeah.
Feels hugely different.
Yeah.
Genuinely hugely different. All right. So what I would suggest you do, get into pairs and work that, and we'll have a look round, okay? With women, it tends to be more mobile, less an issue, but particularly guys, it will be quite challenging, I suspect. Okay?
Always wants to play with alliteration sports.
Have you done this kind of thing?
No.
It makes a massive difference. So it's really like, it's not a thing to do every week. It's just getting to understand the system.
Oh, that's good.
Feel like moving? Okay, so.
Maybe I could rub your back at the same time here.
So sometimes you go back and do relax and not relax at all. He's beginning to move. There we go. That's beginning to move now, isn't it? Much better, isn't it? Okay. Nice big clump. Yeah. Okay, and then this will probably be horrendous actually. Now this will be solid.
You just wait till you get to Alex.
So excited this last stage. She's like, yeah,
Just try it.
doesn't really move.
How does it feel?
It's like,
I was saying, I used to play a little cricket, so probably the nerves in my feet are there probably.
Okay, just stand up, move around. Okay, so how are we doing?
Now you're giving me a foot.
Hold the base when you do that.
Like this.
Okay.
And then
Yeah.
I can feel the clicks. I think this is the first time ever my feet have been up here.
Could well be the last time.
Yes.
Anything you want to say?
No. That's nice, yeah.
It sort of feels back.
How much is that? 5 hours?
Larry, you're so confident. Ankle mobility, so maybe like.
I was just waving. Does my ankle do this?
Knee to wall. So the knee to wall test is also a mobility development tool. Alright, so you remember foot away from the wall, toes, and then we're going to work to try and get this through to it. Alright? So after having done this, this is what you can do in terms of going up towards the wall. So if we're done, let's come over to the wall. So it made a big difference to you, didn't it? Yeah. Okay. So let's compare your left foot with your right foot. Let's have a look. Do your right foot first. Doesn't matter. Just remember your heel can't come off the floor. You're going to try and touch the. There's no chance. Okay, so you need to come much further forward to. Okay. And then. Right, now let's compare the left foot. Okay, slide it until we get. It's definitely different. It's not very much, but it's definitely different. Yeah? Feel different?
Yeah.
Okay. Right, can we just, can we have a look at... Hello? Can we jump over to here, please? Just conscious of time. So, the knee-to-wall test is a linear measurement, right? So it's just working back to front. But in terms of mobility development, we want to look at a range of stuff. So, whilst we might think about just working here, and we need to think about the mechanics about how we do that, we also might want to think about working in these positions. The knee's still travelling forward, but I'm making my toes point in a different direction. Okay? So often the tendency for you guys will be to lean forward and to drop your weight onto your toe. Right? So what I'm keen for us to do is to get this position where the heel is heavily planted, and then we're working here, and we're going to have to work hard to keep that heel. So if you look, if I do that, it's quite easy for me to lift my heel and not be aware of it. Sit back and push through here. Okay? Very straightforward. It's repetition that makes the difference. Okay? So it's pushing yourself through the range. What we've already found is that when you mobilise the ankle, it does make a difference in terms of that range of movement. That's fundamental for you folks in terms of when you're actually at the catch, isn't it? You've got to have mobility through that ankle right the way throughout the chain, but it starts at the ankle. Yeah? So that's that step, which kind of diverted off. Do you remember where we were? Hip flexors, weren't we? Yeah? Good. What came after hip flexors last week? Back. So we went into happy cats and angry cats. Good. Let's go happy cats and angry cats. So remember, one of the things about this kind of approach is that you're looking to develop your total body awareness. It's about understanding, as you move, which bit of your body you are using to move to the next piece. Okay, so last time when we talked about the angry cat position, most people think about just having a piece of string in the middle of their back. But what I'm interested in is if I take a piece of string that's closer to your head or further down your back, can you find the place where that string pulls you up? So can you change the point of elevation along the spine? Can you make it ripple up and down the spine? Have a play. What happens when you change the position of your hands? For example, at the moment most of you have got your fingers pointing forward. What happens when you change the point of your fingers outwards 90 degrees? President's chimp and rip it up. Does it change anything? Doesn't it? So interestingly, what stretch have you got now? You've got a forearm stretch out there too. So if you have a look at John, some of you may or may not be able to do that. It's a very effective way of beginning to stretch your forearms. Okay. Remember to try and keep your hands underneath your shoulders rather than out in front. Okay, so now we're going to go into happy cat. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to try and put your hands back in neutral position where you're most comfortable. We want the same thing. We want to try and explore along the length of the spine about where you can create curvature or not. work it up? Can you go up 3 or 4 vertebrae? Can you go down 3 or 4 vertebrae? How does that work? Interested particularly about what it's like in the upper part of your back. Can you isolate your lower back and then make your upper back go into extension? And the way to isolate your lower back is what? Is to brace it with the anterior or your lower abdominals. Okay, if you want your lower back to stay straight, we're going to try and lock this off and then isolate into the upper back. Okay, so you'll feel it. When you get fatigued, particularly on a longer race, maybe a heads of river race, you will be playing with the balance of these muscles in order to optimise what you perceive to be force production. So understanding how they feel and when you can access them and use them is key. Okay, now we're going to go into angry cat position. Hands where they are. As tall as you possibly can, angry as you can. Keep your feet and hands where they are, and now sit back right onto your heels. Okay, make your spine as long as you possibly can. Keep your bum on your heels. In that position, we're now going to reach under one arm. Okay, reach through it so that your hands should be side by side rather than at 90 degrees. So try and make your spine long and rotate to the line. Yes, good. Right. Keep your head looking down. Quite mobile. Okay, so don't go there. Alright, so hands. Where should you be working that from to try and get that rotation? It should be your back, in fact it should be your obliques rather than your shoulders. Staying in that position, change your hand position so you're at 90 degrees, so it's coming out so you're in this position here. Okay, still reach. But now we do want to roll your shoulder round and down as close to the floor as we can whilst you're reaching up as far as you can. Yes, you can now turn your head to look through it. And look how on a lot of you, what's happened to the top hand? It's no longer in a straight line with you, is it? With a lot of you, okay? It's now wandered. Okay? Are we just flopping here or are we reaching? And are you trying to understand how to reach? So if I'm doing this, what must I be doing? I'm using my obliques to rotate my trunk to get underneath it. I'm not just flopping my hand through, I'm understanding how to create rotation along my spine. Who's got a sense about where they're rotating from? Yeah? Okay, swap hands. So can I just before you do that, can I just emphasise this point? Is that when you're reaching through here, you can reach, which is all shoulder, or I can reach and I can rotate and create a movement along my spine in that plane. And it's that I'm interested in. I'm not interested in a front hand over here. Rotate along the spine and get this movement. Because that's again what we're going to be doing in the boat. You need to get your obliques and an awareness about where your obliques are. Okay, so we need to pair up now. Right. So one person's going to stay on the knees and we're going to do the pull through. You want to stand up, have a throw around the arms and legs and things. So. Loosen up. So this ability to rotate and manage the spine is important clearly in the boat. Most of you are really stiff. It's less so with women because it tends to be more mobile than men. But even so, we'll still see it. We're now going to work in pairs. So this needs to be nice and straight and long. Other hand's going to come through. I'm going to fix here. And I'm now going to try and pull him through whilst he maintains a long spine. And then he's going to resist gently. Okay, so now we'll lock this off. Hold it for a count of 8, then relax. And then we've got much more movement coming through there. Okay, same thing, just a gentle pull. Okay, try and keep the spine long. So we're getting some mobility through there, okay. Avoid hunching, if you can, this kind of stuff. And avoid going into hyperextension. Just nice, long, straight spine, and then we're getting that rotation through. All right? Good stuff. Off we go in pairs. Obviously do both sides. Good.
Spine long, Jack. Long.
Dropping your head and rotating now the spine. It's a small difference, but it's an important one. Part of the issue with that is the problem with that is it's obviously you're using some assistance, so we need to try and get you managing that rotation yourself. So we're going to do a couple of things which are quite useful. So we're going forward and grab ankles, squat in that position, and then in that position with my knees pushed out, I'm going to take this and try and reach up and round. Okay? So you should feel fairly quickly. Now remember where this action is coming from in terms of rotation. It's coming from the obliques, it's coming from your back to help you get into that position. Stay seated, don't cheat by getting your bum up. The spine needs to stay long and you need to rotate through it. So if we now put you down to good. Okay, so you use this kind of posture about and down, high, squat here, helps you squat into that position and then rotate through. Okay? How many are finding that very difficult? What does that position look familiar like? Well, you're not waving your arms out here. So that kind of mobility there. So the other thing we can do with this is to lunge forward here and then begin to think about rotating. You're going to grab through here and rotate right the way through to here. Okay, so lunge. So there's a contradiction here for most of you, the difference between relaxation and appropriate tension. So you can see, certainly down this side, blade still, we've got you guys going, down this side, with company students. Most of the girls are finding this much easier, so we have greater mobility, but they're not fighting it. Right? So what a world-class athlete is beginning to be understood for isn't just the tension when they apply force, it's the relaxation between the application of force. The best athletes know how to switch off their system so they're not working against it before they then reapply force. So let's have a go at that. We've got to get into a position where we've got to use certain parts of our body that need tension and we need some other parts of our body that don't need tension. Alright, so you've got to work on that. In rotation, we're going to use the obliques in our back together. We're not going to work in some of the other areas where up here it's like, yeah, really, traps are locked off, lats are engaged. I'm going to fight against that. Really relax. I'm guessing, Cameron, can we see the best rowers look like they're actually quite relaxed?
Yeah, definitely.
Relatively. Not too relaxed in the boat, actually. So, can we do the same thing, both of those, the squat and the lunge component, where you attempt to go with it, not to fight it? Off you go. So that's the movement puzzle for you. So one of the things you're going to pick in that, if you can. The question is, why movement? It's as low as you can go, so you can't change it. So be clear, where's it happening? Is it happening in your shoulder or is it happening in your spine?
You're right.
So, just think about is that in your shoulder or is it So for those of you, which tends to be at the moment with girls, the question I'll ask some of you is the movement taking place in your spine or is it taking place in my shoulder? So I can have some current rotation if this is moved. And actually I haven't moved much here, or I can have rotation and some shoulder. So it's the rotation through the spine I'm interested in. Alright, is it different at all? Working out where you can kind of let going with it rather than fighting against it. Yeah? Slightly depressing in the sense that
it's like fairly new. But it's all quite, yeah, it just doesn't really quite restricted.
Okay. But that's actually some information that we need, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, one of the things I said last week was, this process, yes, it's a mobility development process, but the underpinning thing, the underlying foundation, is body awareness. That's the thing that actually drives your ability to become a top-class athlete, from whatever level that might be. It doesn't mean necessarily you have to run for Great Britain, but you can be a top-class club athlete, the very best in that level. You need to understand what your body's doing. And that's what this is about as much. Even last week and this week, we found bits of your body you didn't know existed. So your job now is to manage those. So if, in your case, if you're going, well, actually, I was kidding myself because it was all coming on my shoulder, that's fine. Because it means then, at least you know now, I need to try and work spinally, and I need to think, how do I do that, and which muscles do I get to work? Okay, so we're going to finish on a bit of quiet stuff now. We're going to do a bit, see whether this works for most of you. I've done it with a couple of you, I think, where we're going to try and get your hip flexors to chill out and relax, and to demonstrate the relationship between your hip flexors and your diaphragm and your abdominal muscles. So, if you work in pairs, I'm going to ask you, can I just borrow your set? So, most of you, if we find the hip bone come in about the thumb's dimension to it and press, we'll find that actually this is pretty uncomfortable. Very strong, yeah. So, facially very good. You do well in the SS. But pretty uncomfortable. Yeah. So, painful. Just do the same on each other and work out how uncomfortable that is. All right. Then we're going to get one of you to lie down. Same thing. Just lie down. Feet flat on the floor. Okay. Same thing. So this is really ropey. Okay. Understand where they are. And then we're going to do some breathing and see whether that tension changes. All right. So this is a good thing to do before you go to bed tonight. If you're having trouble sleeping, this works really well. Okay. So just work, standing and on the floor. Work out how tight your hip flexors are. Whoever's being palpated, this is your measure about whether this is going to work for you or not. It doesn't work for everybody, it works for quite a lot of people. All right? So you've got 1 minute to do that with each other, and then we're going to crack on. Yeah? Oh!
That's not bad. I don't like this game. This is bad.
I'm not the
Just
This bit, I know it's tempting to, sometimes it can get a bit giggly or a bit chatty. Can we just try and relax and not talk and just go with the flow, all right? Before we lie down, I just wanted to talk to you about breathing. So we do breathe as part of the two mechanisms to breathe. Any medics in the room, keep asking that. 1 or 2, yeah. So we diaphragmatically breathe. We don't breathe in, air gets shoved in by pressure. All right? So we create a vacuum in our bodies. By pulling the diaphragm, contracting the diaphragm, it creates a vacuum around our lungs and air is pushed in. All right? So it's the diaphragm that does the work in the main. And you can see that by diaphragmatically or belly breathing, depending on what part of the world you're coming from. So you can inflate basically this area by pulling the diaphragm down and emphasising that element of breathing. In addition to that, your ribs are like bucket handles. They have small muscles in between them, and they can add to that ventilation by doing this, which effectively just increases that volume of vacuum in terms. By this coming up, it also adds to that and you get more ventilation. So we do the two things. Most people breathe all bucket handle, really low ventilation, particularly athletes. And I think it's one of the challenges for elderly people, is they don't get much deep ventilation in terms of lungs. And my mum, bless her, 85, she can see it go here. There's nothing happening down below. So we're going to talk about those two different forms of breathing separately, and then we're going to add them together. All right? Good. Lie down. Feet flat on the floor, knees bent. Please. Did you get down?
No.
So all of you lie down? Yeah, sort of good. You haven't checked each other out, that's fine. So, the rules are, you must have your head on the floor, you cannot raise your head. Your feet must be flat on the floor and your hands must be by your side at the moment. Okay? You will at some point need to put your hands over your head. Don't move, I will go over your hands. Okay, at the moment, the exploration is going to be belly breathing. So we're going to breathe in through your nose only, through the back of it, hands by your sides, through the back of your nose. Imagine you going all the way down the back of your throat, into your lungs at the back, swirling at the bottom of the lung, and then out through your mouth. What we're going to need to do is to feel that belly inflated. Right, belly inflated. And we're going to have 8 of those. Do close your eyes if you feel that's appropriate. Because everybody started at the same time, just keep going until I say stop. So emphasize the depth of this. Visualize it sweeping right way down the bottom of the lung. See if we can avoid a sneaky bit of cheating going on by your chest rising and falling. Should really just be your tummy. Okay, so now what we're going to do, we're going to breathe in through your tummy, and then when you fully breathe in and don't think you can find any more, you're going to breathe in a little bit more by raising your chest. Okay, so we're going to go and really squeeze out the last drop in your chest. On these breaths, it's quite likely you should feel the depth of breathing that you haven't felt before. Same rules, in through your nose, right down the back, belly first, and then finish with a hugely extended chest. Okay, so now, keeping where you are, keep breathing. Lift your hands up so they're pointing directly to the ceiling. Okay, so the rhythm is, each time you breathe out, one hand should go down and touch the floor. When you breathe in, that hand comes up, back to where you are now, and the other one goes down. So the rhythm is alternate hands as you breathe in and breathe out. Okay? So as you breathe out, the hand goes down, just over your head to the floor. Doesn't come down beside you. Remember, it's going to start in an upright position, and then it's just going to go back down over your head and alternate the two. At this stage, we are now thinking about lengthening the spine and getting really long from the pelvis all the way up to the top of your head whilst we're breathing. Okay, hands stay upright together now. So now the rhythm is we're going to do both hands together. So both hands come down. We need to maintain contact with the floor and keep breathing. Okay, so hands come up. Now at the same time as your hands go down, I want you to extend your legs so they slide along. And as your hands come up, your legs come up. We're now going to be working in unison. So as you breathe out, we're now going to be long and tall and chilled. Point your toes as far as you can. We're now going to connect the tip of our fingers to the very tip of our opposite big toe. left arm, right big toe. Head down. Some people are departing, don't worry about them. Perfect. Okay. Just relax, hands down by sides. So, let's see whether it's had any effect whatsoever. So if you bend your knees, put your feet flat on the floor, I will whiz round. Just tell me it's your decision. Oh, yeah. Better? Look, I've been round half of you now, and better? Bit better? Okay. Have a play, check out each other, but so far, out of this vast majority, your hip flexors are better. Okay? Just check each other out, last couple of minutes and then we'll be done. Did that work? Yes? And do you feel slightly more chilled?
Bedtime.
Right, bedtime. So it's a really good thing to do before you go to bed. Because it does have the habit of breathing about relaxation, but actually you can see, because there's a relationship between this deep musculature, it has a positive effect in terms of muscle tension. Right? Same old story, regularity, frequency, will sort itself out. Good, nice to see you all.